All right, we are back here on the podcast, or just on the suffering, going through the year in review. We're going to go back to some of the most memorable moments from the 20 year in podcasting here. Joining me today on the podcast, my great co-host from the Sky Guys podcast, Pete Consadori is here. Pete, how are you?
Doing well. I think this is the first time I'm doing this with you. The year in review on the Just and the Suffering. We've
Yeah,
done the year in review for Star Wars before, but this is exciting. I'm excited to talk about some other stuff other than Star Wars, and excited to spend the time with you here in the podcast.
yeah. I mean, it's been a while since you come over to the mothership, aside from the Sky Guys crossover.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the last time I was on the flagship here was what, back when we were recording at Iona.
I think we've got a. I think what's through his office is no holy moly this year because that was usually like our go-to.
All right. Holy Moly was on the regular Just and the Suffering, which they haven't been renewed yet, which I can't understand why. I thought that show was great, but the ratings probably were not the greatest for them to renew it. So
I've
we'll
been
see if it comes back.
I've been more expensive than they were hoping for in terms
Oh,
of.
hell yeah. There was so much shit that they had to build and produce up. I mean, they had a good, what was it, 4 seasons? They took a couple seasons off Hulu, which makes me a little interested as to why.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I mean that's true. I totally forgot we used to do the Holy Moly stuff.
yeah. I think they might be dead, unfortunately.
It's probably that. I mean, it's very unfortunate. I thought it was a great show. But it's probably very niche and very expensive to make, right? So I mean, I don't blame them for not wanting to dump more money into it.
Yeah, for sure here. So this on this year, this used to be in the holiday special proper, but I did not want to have, this turned to another 2.5 hour podcast. So we're going to do this one in the last episode of the calendar year this year. So we're going to go through the year. Pete and I are going to listen back to some clips from the year in podcasting, going all the way back to January through now. And I say Pete does appear a couple of times in these audio clips. So Pete's going to have himself to hear as well.
Yeah, I never like hearing myself, so this would be interesting.
Yeah. So those of you watching on YouTube, the audio ones will just have audio, but the ones that actually were YouTube reels, we'll show you the video version of the reel on the podcast here. So I think that's a good way to do this, Pete. We should have some fun with this.
Yeah, no, I'm totally excited. Excited to see the clips. All right, so full disclosure, I was telling Mike off the air here. I have not looked up any of these clips. I haven't looked up any of these topics. There's going to be some topics that I have no clue what I'm talking about, but we're going to try. We're going to try to figure it out. I wanted to do that just for the aesthetic of the show, right? Be a little surprised, see what's new, learn something, and give my genuine reaction to what you had going on this year.
Yep. So I think one of the things here, I feel like you would say for sure 2023 is not a great year for New York sports.
No, I mean, Rangers have been doing well. Let's call it late 2023. Baseball, obviously abysmal. Football has been, lack of a better word, interesting
Yeah.
for New York sports.
Yeah. And I think we should have seen that this is a bad home for this year coming. I know back when, the whole big three for Brooklyn broke up because that was also, I forgot that this year until I went back and looked at my footage. I forgot, oh, yeah, they traded away Durant and Kyrie, and that was the end of the Nets.
Yeah, I mean, was there bad blood between them, or were they trying to move cap? Like, what was going on with them? Why did they make that move?
Well, this thing was sort of falling apart. I remember that at one point Kyrie didn't then ask for a trade, and then they gave it to him. They were tired of his
I
antics.
do remember the trade request. I do remember hearing that. Listening to what was I listening to? I think I was listening to Michael K show on ESPN Radio, and
Yeah,
I
and then
do remember that trade request come through.
yeah, and then they ended up trading him Kevin Durant, I think, a couple days later to Phoenix, and basically gutted that entire era of Brooklyn basketball here. And I had the guys from the Sorry Interrupt podcast on, I think right after the NBA trade deadline. We talked about the breakup of the Nets, and Sean Rowe and Tom came off their commentary on this. So let's listen in back to, I want to say this was in February, it's episode 336. This is Sean and Tom talking about the breakup of the Nets.
It's one of the biggest failures in sports history. I don't think there's any other way to talk about it. For a stretch, you had three of the top 10 players in the entire league on the same team. And the various iterations of this team with, Kyrie and Durant, with LeVert, Allen, and Dinwiddie, and then obviously the Harden period, and then, what was going to become of Ben Simmons and some of these other guys. And it was just, Tom and I talked about it at length on the pod. It was time to rip the Band-Aid off. I got to be honest, as fun as it was thinking and talking yourself into potentially this team going on a run. I mean, let's not forget they were 18-2 over a 20-game stretch from late November into early January. But the drama was just insane. constantly worrying about who's going to ask out or are they going to come back. Kyrie was obviously at the focal point of everything. If he gets vaccinated, Harden stays. Durant doesn't get hurt, Harden stays. Simmons is not the albatross that he is. But I also think that I said this, and Tom kind of made fun of me for this comment, but you've got to dare to be great. And that's what they did. And I think that there's a lot of organizations across all sports that have to take chances. The Brooklyn Nets and formerly New Jersey Nets have never been a team that have attracted top marquee superstars. But I think this is a blueprint for them and then other teams going forward, where when you completely turn over the keys to your organization, and instead of working with the superstars, you work for the superstars, it's going to do more harm than good. So it was an epic failure, and, completely ridding themselves of any of the questions and just moving on, I think was the right move.
Yeah, so Pete, what did you think about the break of the Nets there? I feel like Sean hit the nail on the head here. This was a case, feel like, where the Nets sort of just let the big three, particularly Durant, Irving, sort of run the team, and then they basically got nothing to show for it and made a mess of everything.
I mean, I'm not too well versed in basketball in the NBA, but I feel like a lot of the big superstars in the NBA do have a say in their team. I feel like I've heard that with LeBron. I know LeBron's a different creature entirely, but I feel like I've heard those kind of rumors where like players are part of the decision making when it comes to getting players from other teams. I feel like I've heard that before. Could be completely wrong. Could be talking out of my ass here.
Oh, no, they have input.
Say that again.
They do have input, but I do feel like with the probably the Nets,
sure,
they just bent over backwards whatever Kevin Durant wanted.
Yeah, I mean, do we think Brooklyn was like so just ecstatic to get KD that's why they overcorrected and just bent over backwards to do whatever he wanted?
I'd say pretty much.
I mean, I agree with what was said. I think at one point it was said this was like one of the worst disasters in basketball history. Am I quoting that correctly?
It's just the biggest failure in NBA history.
Biggest failure. I mean, is it the biggest failure, right? They tried something, it wasn't working, so they moved on. I mean, do you just, like, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, do you just hold them hostage and make it worse? I mean, like, yeah, they were winning and stuff, so that's why it probably hits a little hard. What was the record? 18-2 in the last like 2 months of the year or something like that, the 2022 year or whatever it was.
Yeah, the problem was like those three were never healthy together. There's one point where they had 3 of the 10 best players in the sport, and then that second round of the playoffs.
That's also something that we can get into is NBA player health. Were they really that injured, or is it more of those maintenance days? Like, I don't want to play.
No, we had like hamstrings with Harden and Kyrie in the playoffs a couple of times. Durant had various issues like his knee. So
legitimate injuries, but injuries nonetheless that were happening too much. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a failure, right? You tried. It'd be a failure if you were in talks to get all these guys, you trade away a bunch of pieces to get them, and then you don't get them. That would be a failure, right? You didn't even get them. I mean, they were all there. You tried it. There was drama. You move on. Well, what else is an organization you're supposed to do? As a New York Knicks fan, and I use that term loosely because I don't follow them. I don't follow basketball as much as I probably should when it comes to New York sports, but I'm sure a lot of Brooklyn Net fans are really upset about this. If this was the New York Knicks or the New York Rangers or the New York Jets, and you had these 3 or 4 top guys that were supposed to take you to the promised land, right? Take you to win these championships, and you just get rid of them. I'm sure it's a huge shock to the fan base.
Yeah, for sure. Here, let's go on here to a more positive note for the area here, because you remember back in March Madness, UConn just stampeded the whole country and won the whole thing.
Did they? Again, basketball wasn't really following.
Yeah, so I'm sure remember UConn played our alumni, our school alma mater Iona in the first round. I
remember that.
And then they went on to basically stampede the entire field, win the national championship. So they won their 5th title here. And a friend of ours, Troy Moriello, was on the podcast doing our March Madness coverage. And we had this discussion, I think, before the experts were talking about UConn's a blue blood. UConn belongs in the territory of the blue bloods. So that was happening. Troy and I were ahead of the curve on that. So Troy and I reacted to the media coming around to our cause after the case. But this is from episode 346, I believe. I actually double checked that, my math here. Oh, sorry, 344. This is us talking about UConn as a blue blood after they won March Madness. So let's listen to Troy for a little bit.
All time, it feels like it's a UConn to lose. And as a Big East fan, as a St. John's fan, that's probably unfortunate because I don't want to see UConn win again. But it looks like right now it's going to be them.
Yeah, it'll be the 5th title for UConn since 1999. And you think about it, that,
Mhm.
and for everybody who doesn't like, I know all of just like, oh, they're not a blue blood. They're not like all these schools like Kansas, Kentucky, and Indiana. They would have won more titles in that span than those 3 schools combined if they win.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually just thinking that. Like, yeah, I mean, obviously they don't have the 50 years of history that some of those schools have, but you look since the turn of the century or right before the turn of the century, like UConn is if they win this one, has a resume that stacks up against anyone in the country, like in terms of tournament appearances, but especially the national titles, Final Fours, like they get there and they win. And they're a blue blood. Like it's very obvious they're not the traditional blue blood that's been good for 50 years, like I mentioned, but they're over the last 25 years, their resume stacks up with literally anyone in the country.
Yeah, I feel like they're like in this category. I call it like the new blue bloods. Like it's like they're in there. Villanova's in there.
Yeah.
Like
Hmm.
Gonzaga's in that mix, and they haven't won a title yet. Like that sort of crew. Like these teams have just really come on and become like dominant power the last like 25 years.
Exactly. Yeah. Like aren't the traditional, Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, but yeah, have really, have resumes that really match up with those programs over the past 25 years. Yeah. They're definitely in that class.
Yeah, and I do think it's an interesting point here because I feel like a lot of like college basketball people are very stodgy about like, oh, you weren't around in 1960 and when we were having NCAA tournaments with like 30 teams, and UConn, I mean, just has been dominant as anybody in the sport over the last like quarter century, and they belong on that list, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, do me a favor, explain the blue blood designation.
Yeah, sure. So like basically like all these like schools with all this traditional history of like being dominant in the sport. Talk about like Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina, UCLA, Indiana, Kansas. Those are like your blue blood schools where like all the top recruits like to go there. They have this pedigree of success in basketball and so on. Like UConn is one more late than than most of those teams on the lists, and like they don't get the same respect as a blue blood because they've not been doing it as long.
Yeah, I mean, I'll compare it to the original 6 of the NHL, right? I feel
Yep.
like when you talk about the Montreal Canadiens and the Chicago Blackhawks, Rangers, and stuff, a lot of these teams haven't won as of late. The Maple Leafs. So that resonates. So I understand that. I mean, look, like I said, I don't follow basketball as much, but I know UConn's a good basketball team. So if I know as a person who is not really paying attention, obviously they have to be in some sort of conversation. I think that goes to any sports team. And I think that if you want to designate original teams versus new teams, do it by just timeline. Don't do it by dominance. Don't do it by, well, they're not a blue blood because they haven't been around as long. I personally think it doesn't matter. If, like you had said, if they're going to have more championships, which they won that year, you guys called it, right? You were saying that they took it all the way there. If they're going to have more championships as of late than all those blue blood teams combined, or 3 or 4, whatever, you got to show them the respect. You have to admit that they're winning. They're beating these teams that are so highly regarded.
Yeah. And the wild thing about UConn is like with them, it feels like whenever they get to the Final Four, they win. Like I think they've been there like 6 times and they've lost like one Final Four game. When they get to the final, they don't lose.
I mean, that's an incredible stat, right? If you're 5-1 out of the 6 times getting to the Final Four, I mean, that's an incredible stat to show. I mean, it's they get there, they win. It's as simple as that. So, look, I hope they get the resignation that they deserve. If they're winning championships, all the players, all the students put in their hard work to get into the tournament and do what they have to do. And it's heartbreaking for when they lose, but you got to give credit where credit's due. They're working hard. They're winning championships. You got to give them that designation.
Yeah, absolutely here. And they're doing well so far this year. They're in the top 5 as of recordings time. So like they might be right in the mix again.
Right. I mean, this is something that we can have a conversation. Let's call it again. UConn wins again this year. Repeat. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it here. And also, let's not go to an area where you're more familiar with here in terms of like what we cover here. We talk some Star Wars here because we got
all right.
The Sky guys once again like share all of the live action recaps on the podcast. So we talked some Mandalorian here, and Pete, I know you had end up like having a scheduling conflict. We did the actual Sky Guys year in review show. So like give everybody your opinion on like how you feel about Mandalorian season 3.
It was very overrated. I think it was underwhelming. I think you guys thankfully were able to explain my thoughts because I couldn't be there, but they had a product that was doing well. the first 2 seasons were written with a purpose to get Grogu off the show and start something anew. And they couldn't really do that because I'm sure the Disney execs and also the writers and showrunners said, hey, Grogu's the most popular character in this show. We've gotten people outside of Star Wars fans to watch this show because of Grogu, Baby Yoda. That was like the whole thing. They force him back in and you get this underwhelming season 3 of this like Mod Podge of just Mandalorian, Jedi, like all this crap just kind of thrown at the wall to see what sticks. It wasn't the most terrible thing I've seen ever, but it didn't have an identity to me. It just wasn't what we thought season 3 was going to be. And honestly, and I'm sure it was talked about too, season 4 has been getting so many different rumors about what it's going to be. Is it going to be a movie? Is it going to be a series? If it goes to movie, this Mandalorian series is done. It's dead. And that's why I still think Ahsoka's the best TV series, even over Mando.
Yeah, and if there was an episode that embodied what went wrong with season 3, what would you say it was?
It's hard to remember each episode, but to me, they didn't do the Moff Gideon stuff as well as they could have, and they did it too late. They introduced all this stuff way too late, too quick, and it was just like, boom, we're done. It's okay. Everything's sunshine and roses, and Grogu's playing in a lake, and it's just, I think that's what was done wrong. You had a lot of great ideas, but you had to take 10 pounds of stuff and shove it in a 2-pound bag.
Yeah, I'd say for me, when we had 2 very famous celebrities show up for a random episode, like I think that was probably like that might jump the shark moment for them.
Yeah, I mean, I was having a conversation with one of my friends, Ray, the other day about just Marvel. So obviously not Star Wars. I feel like once Marvel started to get the famous actors to come in and play parts in Marvel, that's when Marvel started to get tacky. And that's when Marvel started to go a little downhill. A lot of the original Marvel cast, they were not superstars. Marvel created them and made them superstars. Chris Evans was obviously an actor everyone knew, but I don't think he was at the magnitude he was unless he becomes Captain America. Robert Downey Jr. was, he had his own life problems and stuff. So I think introducing all these popular people into Star Wars, it's very hard to separate them. You're looking at him, you're like, look, it's Jack Black. It's not this character. And I think that's also kind of takes away from the immersion of it.
Yeah, I pulled a clip from that our coverage, our recap of that episode. It was 347 in this feed. It was chapter 22 of Mando, Guns for Hire. So let's take a look back at some of the Jack Black Lizzo commentary here. So this is from back in, I think, April. So here we go.
These two, though, Jack Black and Lizzo, it takes me out of especially Jack Black, because I know him so well. I don't know if you guys, I know this Lizzo person was famous, but I don't know who she is. But Jack Black, it just takes me out of it because I'm not thinking about his character. I'm thinking that's Jack Black.
Yeah, Pete.
Christopher Lloyd, it did not feel the same way. His character was fine. I thought it went well, but with Jack Black, I'm sitting there and I'm not thinking Star Wars anymore. I'm thinking real world.
Yeah, Pete. When you watch this, so you're sitting there like, wait, is that Jack Black? Because that was sort of like my reaction when I first saw him pop up.
I knew exactly it was Jack Black. There was no question in my mind that was Jack Black. And then I also thought it was Lizzo, and I had to look it up just to make sure because I know who she is, but I'm not familiar with her face, and because I'm not really seeing a lot of her on my social media or whatever. But I 100% knew that was Jack Black from the moment he appeared on screen, and the first words out of my mouth is, they freaking put Jack Black in Star Wars. How is this a thing? Like I'm with Nick. I could not care I could care less about the character. All I kept saying was, there's Jack Black and his like humongous beard, and I'm waiting for him to start doing like some School of Rock crap or something like that on screen.
Yeah, I mean, we got that. We got Lizzo doing the Cleaner Hearts thing from Alice in Wonderland. That was also a little weird here. And Pete definitely did take me out of the episode where it's sort of like, I mean, his character's named Captain Bombardier, and he apparently is in the Imperial Amnesty Program. There's a bunch of plot stuff about how like he can rule a planet, but he can't like run a military. Like also there was stuff of like, I can't call him that. It's Jack Black being Jack Black, basically.
Yeah, and I think they're also pushing this Imperial reintroducement program a little too hard.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be something significant in the future, either this season or the next.
Yeah, I remember when this episode aired, like I was so like confused and bizarre, like in a very weird state of mind about like, wait, Star Wars did what now?
Yeah, I mean, I encourage everyone to go watch the Sky Guys podcast and listen to it because you get more in depth when it comes to these clips. But it was jarring. I mean, you don't expect to see someone like Jack Black appear in Star Wars. It just it we talked about it just before the clip, and then Nick said it beautifully too, and it just takes you out of the whole experience. I could not unsee it. I just knew it was Jack Black. It was like if they put Daniel Radcliffe into Star Wars, I'd be like, that's Harry Potter. Why is he here? So it was very jarring, and I just think it again cheapens the season. And again, as a whole, the season was underwhelming to begin with, so this just kind of didn't help anything.
Yeah, that's for sure here. And let's move ahead now. We'll go to some we'll go to another team that we are familiar with here, our New York Jets, because they made a big move when they traded for Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, we didn't know that his season would basically last 4 plays, but back in April when the trade was made, there was a lot of enthusiasm about the Rodgers pickup.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't super enthused. I got to be honest with you. Not because he's not a great player, but the Jets seem to get guys that are at the end of their career. And the guys they traded for, too, and they got Lazar, Dalvin Cook, guys that I consider toward the end of their careers, not in their peak. Again, I can't do what they do. Not at all criticizing their talents. But to me, they had other quarterbacks on the table they could have went for, and they either failed at it, and then Aaron Rodgers was the last resort, or they just were they're all in on Rodgers, and they just didn't, take a look at, the Derek Carrs or the Jimmy Garoppolos of the world.
Yeah, well, they took the big swing, and I talked to Daryl Slater of the Star Ledger back in April after the draft about his take what the Aaron Rodgers era would have to be for the Jets' expectations with this team here. So let's take a look back on what he had to say about that. This is from our post-draft episode here, number 353. So let's go ahead and listen to what Daryl has to say.
Well, the bottom line to me for this Rodgers trade is they have a 2-year window to make the Super Bowl, or else the trade is not a success. So for as long as he's with him, I should say, is the window. But let's assume it's 2 years. I don't think he's going to be one and done based on everything he said and based on how it looks like they're going to rework the contract. So let's just say 2 years, right? So over the next 2 years, to me, they have to get to the Super Bowl. They do. I mean, why else are you making this move if you're not trying to do that? I mean, the Jets, they've been to the AFC Championship game in the recent past of anyone who's not 12 years old, 09 and 10, people who are actual adults remember that. And so to me, this is what they have to do. They got to take the next step. You're doing this franchise altering thing, not just trading away important draft picks, but also, paying a guy a ton of money who's late in his career. It's obviously a win now move, like the ultimate win now move. So they need to, they need to win now. And so if they miss the playoffs this year, I think they probably clean house and fire the coach and the GM. Definitely the coach. And so Robert Saleh under contract through 2025, Joe Douglas under contract through 2024. So the buyouts would not be insane if they were to part ways with both or one of those guys after this year. And so I think they make the playoffs. I do. There's no reason they shouldn't. How deep will they go? A lot depends on health and their offensive line, obviously, and a lot of luck. And let's assume Rodgers stays healthy with all this too. We saw last year with the broken thumb that he suffered in London against the Giants did to his production. But we're assuming here that he stays healthy, that he plays well, close to the MVP level of 20 and 21. But I think that, I think the Jets over the next 2 years, they have as good of a shot as they've ever had since 1969 of winning the Super Bowl. Now, granted, I think those 09 and 10 teams had great defenses, but we all knew what Mark Sanchez was. They have this missing piece now. And unless he suddenly regresses, last year was sort of an outlier because of the thumb and his injury. So then they have the piece they've looked for a really long time. And to me, they have to make the Super Bowl. I don't think they have to win it, but get to new territory.
Yeah, so I do think it's interesting here. Obviously, the assumption was Rodgers stays healthy. I don't think anybody would have assumed he just plays 4 plays and he's gone. But the thing that frustrates you with the Jets, if you watch their games here, is obviously you see how good they are defensively and some of the teams they've beaten, given a hard time to. It's you watch this team, you're if Rodgers could have just stayed on the field, this team is easily in the playoffs, supposed to being 5-8 at time of recording.
You say they're easily in the playoffs. I don't know about easily in the playoffs. I don't know how this team plays with Rodgers. Do they play complacent because they're like, Rodgers will take care of it? I don't know. You would think that they don't. You would think that they'd rally behind Rodgers and play even harder, and they would be a shoo-in for the playoffs and everything like that. But we really don't know how this Jet team is going to play around Rodgers. We only saw 4 plays. We saw them in preseason. They looked good, obviously, with Rodgers. But do they get complacent? Do they play as hard as they do with Zach Wilson under center? Do they play as hard as they did with let's call it Tim Boyle? But at the end of the day, the Jets games I've seen, the officiating hasn't been great.
Oh, no.
Doesn't have any effect on the game. I'm not saying that that's because we lost games, but I was at the Jets-Chiefs game, which was pretty much the Taylor Swift Bowl. Yes. And there was a bunch of plays that could have been drives the other way for the Jets. There was an interception that they called a hold after the interception was caught. It was a whole mess. So I think that with the officiating being unlucky there, and also trying to play with Zach Wilson, who is an unexperienced quarterback. Even though he has reps, he's still an unexperienced quarterback because he's not – I don't think he's learned anything. And I think he looks okay. He looked okay. He looked pretty good last game. But, I mean, at the end of the day, we don't know what's going behind closed doors. We don't know if Zach Wilson's a bad quarterback or we don't know how to coach them. That's why I think the coaching situation is on the table. But, I think Zach Wilson is not the answer. I think they knew that. That's why they went after Rodgers, and now they're kind of stuck with him, so they kind of have to circle back again.
Yeah, I think for sure with them next year, I feel like this gave them all into the coaching staff. I do like that Aaron Rodgers runs the Jets, and like what he wants is like what's going to happen. I think he wants this team back here, but like now they had 2 years, Darryl Slater said. Now they wasted 1 because Rodgers wasn't playing, and now they have basically like 1 or 2 shots left to try and get to a Super Bowl with him.
And let's be real, he had a major injury. Right. I know there's rumors around going that he didn't have the injury, whatever, because he's getting back so quickly, whatever the case may be. How well is he going to play? Is he going to re-injure it, God forbid? We don't even know if we have a year with him. So the Jets need to figure something out. They need to figure something out. And it doesn't seem like they've made any, like Carson Wentz was on the table midseason. And I don't even know if the Jets even spoke with him.
Yeah, we could definitely.
You got Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle. You don't have like all these great quarterbacks. Like at least talk to the guy. Show the fans you're trying.
Yeah.
So it's a frustrating thing to be a Jet fan in that sense. But again, I don't know what happens behind closed doors. I can't throw a freaking football. Who am I to be like, Zach Wilson, you stink. You can't do crap. I can't do it. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, for sure here. Let's get to the summer here for a little bit. We got some fun here because we need to feel a little better about ourselves after talking about the Jets. So, like, Pete, were you a big Barbenheimer guy over the summer?
I was a big Oppenheimer guy. I was not interested in the Barbie movie, not because it didn't look good. My sights were kind of on Oppenheimer, and I don't go to the movies that often, so I only got to see the one.
Yeah, it's wild how big a thing that was for solid like 2 months.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, they were coming out the same day. They were total polar opposites. It was great.
Yeah, for sure. And I did see Oppenheimer in theater. I have seen Barbie since. I have seen it on demand. So like I have seen both movies. They're both pretty good. I personally like Oppenheimer better. But before we got to that point, we did a Christopher Nolan movie ranking podcast with John Stanko and Sam DeRosa. I'm in the middle of summer here, and we talked about the Barbenheimer preview basically. We recorded before these movies came out. So we'll go back to episode 363 and we'll get the preview of Barbenheimer with Stanko and Sam. So let's take a look on the video version here. I got the video clip up.
I think it's going to make a lot of money. Sam, you said it's not going to be a thinking movie. It's going to be different for Greta Gerwig not to create a thinking movie because she typically puts some depth into her movies.
Exactly.
Right. So I'm curious what the audience is expecting versus what they're going to get because the trailers, we don't know what the movie's about. We know she goes into the real world, but what conflict is there in the real world? Like, we don't know what the actual conflict is.
Yeah, I wonder if it's going to be like a Matrix kind of red pill, blue pill thing.
Right, and it's going to be like an allegory of the cave. She wants to leave, so she leaves, and then she's going to try and go back to Barbie Land. She's not going to be able to accept it, and then she's going to have to make a choice. That's probably what's going to happen, something along those lines. I personally am way more excited for Oppenheimer. I'm just going to be straight up with you. Like, Barbie seems like a lot of cringe humor, punch you in the face with social commentary type things. And that's not my type of movie. It's just not, I don't enjoy cringe. I don't enjoy people being awkward and then getting laughed at. Like, that's not my type of thing. And that's the thing that Barbie's going to be when she goes to the weird world. She's going to have all eyes on her with people snickering. And I don't enjoy that. We have Christopher Nolan doing a character piece about one of the most tumultuous times in history with what's going to be groundbreaking cinema, what he always does. And sure, he's going to have some of his same motifs thrown into it, but I like that stuff a lot more. I like the idea of a power struggle and stuff like that. So I'm way more excited for Oppenheimer, but I am in the minority.
That and Cillian Murphy is supposed to have like an Oscar-worthy best actor performance as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love Cillian Murphy. And Margot Robbie's probably going to get some attention too. And like, this is another thing where the casts are equally stacked in both movies.
Mm-hmm.
I like a movie where the cast, while it's stacked, isn't playing like to their fame. And Barbie, because it's the style of the movie, every time you see someone's face is famous, you're gonna go like, oh, that's that person playing a Ken. Oh, that's that person playing a Barbie. Oh, blah blah blah, and you're meant to recognize them.
Yeah.
I don't love that. I love when the cast is stacked, but they're all still playing characters, and you're just seeing them with their talent, and they're showing their talent and not their face. So again, it's a little bit. Again, I think Barbie's gonna be good, but I'm way more excited for Oppenheimer because it's just more my type of movie.
All right, so there we have it. I feel like that they did a pretty good job summing up what Barbie and Oppenheimer ended up being.
Yeah, I didn't see Barbie, so I'd have to take your word for it. Oppenheimer, I loved. Yeah. I got it on Blu-ray the minute it came out. So I saw that in the movie theaters. Christopher Nolan did a fantastic job. And again, I'll just have to take a word on Barbie. Just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, what Stanko was described about the cringe humor in the real world and sale of the blue pill, red pill, all those things come into play here. And the basic gist of the movie I'll throw out here for you is like the villain of the movie is basically the patriarchy. That's what you need to know about what the Barbie movie is. Because basically Ken goes to the real world with Barbie. He learns about patriarchy and likes it and brings patriarchy back to Barbie world.
Got it. Okay. So Stanko was pretty spot on then.
Yeah, pretty much was pretty spot on. So you did a good job summing it up here. And we'll be talking with Sam and Stanko later this week. Like we are going to, towards the end of the week, we're going to be doing our annual pop culture party. It's number 5 coming up here. So
nice.
So a little teaser for those folks here. So we're going to jump ahead in the summer a little bit here too. A little bit of tennis here because Pete, I know you have talked about like you want to check out the U.S. Open at some point, but there was a lot of fun stuff happening at Flushing Meadows this year.
Let me tell you, every year you ask me, every year I feel bad that I can't go because I want to go. And it's another sport I really don't pay attention to as much. Even though I'm interested in it, I play a little bit of it. I'm terrible, by the way, but I play a little bit of it. So it's another sport I probably should be paying attention more.
Yeah, well, it's one I recommend you could check out. The majors coming around here. I know the Australian Open's coming up in a few weeks, so that's something you can keep an eye on if you're a late night person. So like they play a lot of like 10 p.m. matches, like because it's over in Australia. But I spoke to tennis writer Chris Otto ahead of the U.S. Open, and he had some insight on the American women in the tournament, including our eventual winner, Coco Gauff. So let's go ahead and check out what Chris had to say here. This is from episode 370.
Well, those two names you mentioned are the ones that I think are pretty set up to at least get to the quarterfinals. Jessica Pegula has been misconsistency for the last 2 seasons. She's always making quarterfinals of slams. She hasn't had that breakthrough yet, though she did recently win the title at Montreal, which was very impressive. I think that her Grand Slam breakthrough may very well come at this one. And I think Coco's the big story right now because she was really down in the dumps a bit after Wimbledon, lost in the first round to fellow American Sophia Kenin, and was having some struggles with her game. Just really was not really firing on the forehand and not really confident overall. But since she's brought on a new coach by the name of Per Reba and also brought on Brad Gilbert as a consultant, she's changed her game. She's changed her confidence level. She's changed her mindset. She's become a little bit more aggressive, and she's just playing so confident, winning 11 of her last 12 and winning that huge title in Cincinnati. A lot of people are thinking she can win the title at the U.S. Open. I myself am not so sure, but I think definitely a career best performance for Gauff. She's never been beyond the quarterfinals. I would say she's got a good chance to do that. And then there are always a handful of other Americans that are great to watch. Madison Keys, Sloane Stephens, young Alicia Parks, Peyton Stearns, an NCAA champion, is starting to make her way on tour. So a lot of young Americans to look at as well.
Yeah, so this calls in the category, in my opinion, of like the good calls department. I mean, Chris did not exactly call the win, but he did say career best performance Coco Gauff, and we saw that like she had a moment here when she wins the title and ends up being like a big storyline in sports.
Is she new to the sport or relatively new compared to other big names out there?
Yes, I remember she had her breakthrough, I think in 2019. She was a 15-year-old at Wimbledon, beat Venus, and then
Wow.
Been hanging around. She's been like making her noise. She's only like 19 years old.
Well, what you can compete at that young of an age?
In tennis, you can.
Wow. Is 15 the youngest?
15 is the youngest that I've seen going to slam.
That's crazy. I mean, I know that you can compete very young in the Olympics too.
Yep.
But I didn't realize in tennis you could as well. But that's amazing. I mean, first of all, for her to beat, you said Venus at 15 is probably a crazy experience. Yeah, I mean, congratulations to her. She won the whole US Open, right? You were saying?
Yeah, she won the women's draw this year. Like she had a run for the tournament. I mean,
and how old is she now?
She's 19. And
19 years old. That's wild. I mean, good for her. She deserves it. Obviously, I'm sure she put in the work. I mean, as the guy you had in the clip there, she won the last like 11 out of 12 before this campaign. So I mean, that's crazy good too. And who did she beat out? Anyone of noteworthy that I would know?
She beat, I think, the reigning champ Iga Swiatek in the final.
Okay.
So,
all right. Hey, listen. I mean, look, like I said, good for her. A sport I got to be looking at probably more because I am interested in it. But yeah, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's pretty wild here. And I don't know if you saw the video on social media after she won. Like, there's this video infamously going around. It was part of a commercial, like of her attending Arthur Ashe Kids Day. I think like when she was like not like 8 or 9 years old, and then like 10 years was 8 years old, and then like 10 years later she's a champion, which is wild.
It's crazy. Even when like I hear about 18-year-olds playing in the NHL, it's like as a 31-year-old, I'm like that's literally a child. You know, when I was 18, I'm like, oh, I'm an adult and stuff like that. But now that I've gotten older, I'm very like, there's literally children playing in the NHL. So it's definitely crazy to hear that at 19 years old, you're winning championships.
Yeah, for sure. Here, let's now go back to another Star Wars here, because we're in the tie of Ahsoka here, and he has mentioned that previously on this podcast, this is his favorite Star Wars series like ever.
Yeah, in my opinion, the best Star Wars series on Disney Plus to date, and that includes Mandalorian seasons 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, for sure here. And we had a great character arc for Ahsoka in the show itself, and we're flipping with pull years episode 378 on here. I think it's from our part 5 recap on the Ahsoka coverage on the Sky Guys feed. It's over here, but it's talking about Ahsoka's evolution after she goes through the experience in the world between worlds. So let's go to the audio clip here, episode 378. I do think it's important, Pete, that we talk about the change Ahsoka's had here, where before her mission was just, I'm going to stop Thrawn. Now she goes to Hera and says, I'm going to bring them back. And them obviously being referenced to Sabine and Ezra. So we see the evolution of Ahsoka realizing, hey, it's not just trying to prevent a war. We're trying to like make life worth living.
Yeah. I mean, I think Ahsoka's realizing all of that. I mean, Nick and you guys have mentioned it before. I think that this problem or this mission was always dual layered, right? Stop Thrawn, get Ezra. And I think Ahsoka was blinded and kind of just not wanting to think it's about Ezra. I think because she wanted to influence Sabine to understand, like, don't make stupid decisions because of Ezra. Obviously, that didn't work because we saw in the last episode that Sabine just hands over the map. But I think now she's just open to the fact that people have feelings other than let's not have a war, not very stoic, right? So, yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about that.
I think that Ahsoka didn't want anything to do with the Ezra part of the story or the situation because she was under the impression that Anakin's legacy was her legacy and she wouldn't want any attachments. And that's why she pushed Sabine away, why she was missing. If you see at the beginning of the story, Hera's nowhere to be found, or at least hasn't seen Ahsoka in a while. Not that Hera hasn't been found. Not that Hera hasn't been seen in a while, that Ahsoka hasn't been seen in a while. No one knows where Ahsoka's been. She stopped training Sabine. She hasn't seen Hera anymore. They don't even know where. They haven't even tried looking for Ezra, it looks like, in some time. She doesn't want any attachments, and I think her training with Anakin has showed her that just because Anakin's attachments led to a dark path doesn't mean hers will.
Yeah, so Pete, I did think it was a very well-told Star Wars story with Ahsoka's character, which is not something this franchise does very well.
Yeah, I mean, they had 8 episodes to explain a lot, and I think they did it in a very natural and meaningful way. The character development for a lot of those characters, including Ahsoka, were phenomenal. And just like you heard in that clip, Ahsoka goes from this rigid character of we need to make sure we don't start a war and make sure that I train you correctly to, we need those connections. This is what's important. We can stop a war too at the same time, but we need those connections. So there was definitely great character development in there, and still to this day, I can argue for about an hour as to why Ahsoka is a better show than any Star Wars show currently on Disney Plus.
Yeah, for sure. You want more of that coverage, obviously. Go to the Sky Guys podcast. We have a lot of Star Wars stuff out there, including like off-season content for people who are looking for something Star Wars between the live action shows. It might be a bit before you get another one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's a ton of Star Wars. Every time something comes out Star Wars, we're on top of it. We're covering it. So if you have any questions that need to be answered, you can probably find that answer on our podcast.
Yep. So now let's go ahead to the fall sport. We'll wrap up the baseball season here. The Mets made a big personnel change here. They brought in their longtime white whale. They brought in President of Baseball Operations David Stearns, which I know Steve Cohen's waiting 3 years trying to hire this guy. He finally gets the job done here. So I had Will Salmon from The Athletic, Met beat writer, on in September. We talk about the Mets season here, and this happened right after the report that David Stearns getting hired. So let's listen to what Will has to say about the David Stearns hire here. So go ahead and check that out.
Yeah, it's pretty much a home run hire, and it's one, frankly, that Steve Cohen had to make. There wasn't really an obvious second selection there, or second guy. It was David Stearns, or you say to yourself, like maybe they're not going to get the guy that they want, or the kind of guy that they want after all. But yeah, David should help the organization in a major way, particularly with just the way that he controls a 40-man roster and manages a 40-man roster. He tends to get the most and maximize that group. He's been really good over the years of just unearthing these hidden gems that, like a DJ Stewart, for example. He obviously didn't have anything to do with that one, but that's an example of a guy who you don't really expect a whole lot from that really pans out. And David has a really strong track record of doing that with Milwaukee Brewers. And, you need help on the margins, even when you have a bunch of superstars like the Mets did.
Yeah, and that's going to be something that's exciting for Mets fans here, because obviously they have the richest owner in all of professional sports. He can throw his money around whenever he wants. But like in baseball now, I feel like it's more you need to find develop your own guys and find the guys in the margins who are getting overlooked here. And I think David Stearns did very well in Milwaukee. The Brewers, I think, one of the smallest market teams in the sport, and he was in the playoffs, I think, like 6 of 8 years. The Mets had never made it more than 3 in a row, maybe more than twice in a row in their whole existence.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting someone from a smaller market that's able to go to the playoffs, what do you say, two years in a row?
Mets had never been more than 2 years in a row in their franchise history. He made it, I think, like 5 of 8 years in Milwaukee.
Right. So, I mean, that just speaks volumes to his talents and what he can give to a team. I'm not very familiar with him. I'm not very familiar with the Mets and or the Yankees. However, I do remember that there was a time that if you bought the best baseball team, you were the best baseball team. I don't see that anymore. The Yankees were notorious, as a Yankee fan, I'll be the first to admit, notorious for just buying players and being in the luxury tax, right? I mean, that was just how it was. And that was the game that was being played in the front office, and you played that game, and, the Yankees got championships because of it. But as you said, it seems like that climate is changing. You need to start actually worrying about the game of baseball and not just buying the best players, because it's not just getting those names on your roster. It's about the chemistry. It's about how they play together. We talked about it earlier in the show with Brooklyn, the big 3 there. So I think it's a great hire for the Mets. If, this is the first time I'm hearing from him, but to get someone who's gone 5 out of the last 8 years with a low market team, this is a great hire. Imagine the possibilities that the president of baseball operations can have on a team that does have a big market.
Yeah, for sure here. So now we'll get to a topic you're very enthusiastic about. We're going to talk some Rangers hockey, Pete.
Oh yeah. No, it's I'm very excited for this part.
Yeah, and I mean, could you have possibly seen the hot start they've gotten off to this year after the way last year ended?
No, well, look, their year didn't end in a complete just fire, right? I think last year was awkward. We had a bunch of rentals. We were in this, let's try to win now. We got Kane, we got Tarasenko, both of which I knew were not staying. We couldn't afford them. I don't think Kane wanted to stay. He also wanted to get his surgery, which he got to. But I have to say, especially with the injury to Hedel and Capo Caco now, Rangers have been playing great. No reason for concern. I think they're like I can't remember the record off the top of my head, but they have a very good winning record. It's not like they only have one game in the win column.
It's 19-6-1 as of date of recording.
Yeah, I mean, we've only lost 6 games in regulation the whole season so far. That's, to me, crazy. This is like Boston Bruins numbers from last year. They were a little bit better, I think, by this point, though. I think they only lost like 2 games or something like that by this point.
Yeah, they're right in the President's Trophy mix with Vegas and Boston again.
Right. So what concerns me is the President Trophy, though. We all know the stat about whoever wins the President's Trophy. I think only 6 or 7 teams in NHL history, and it's over 100-year tenure, has won the President's Trophy or the top of the league and won the Stanley Cup the same year. So I think it's good that the Rangers lose a couple games, get humbled a little bit, and understand that they're just not, unbeatable. But I have to say, a little concerned about Igor Shesterkin. I think Jonathan Quick's been playing out of his mind, and he's been playing a little bit better than him. So,
yeah. And speaking of Quick, before the season here, I talked to a good friend, Christopher Russo, the host of the Sports the Way Group podcast. He's a big hockey guy, and we talked about the Ranger offseason, which Pete, you would say was not very flashy. It was a lot of veteran experience.
Not at all. Yeah, I mean, even the Jonathan Quick signing, I was like, what are we doing? This dude's washed up. We always get these guys at the end of their career, same thing like New York Jets, like what is going on? But I have to say, I have to take it back. I'm pleasantly surprised about the performance and just how good Jonathan Quick looks in that.
Yeah, for sure here. Let's go to Christopher Russo. We had a good take on what the moves could mean for the Rangers. So this is from episode 385, and the Stearns one was 379 for housekeeping. So here's the Christopher Russo on the Ranger offseason, the moves they made.
It's funny. I did a paper. I don't know how well it did, but I did a paper, I think late in middle school, about Moneyball, and how one of the things Billy Beane said was one of the best things is not necessarily to have, Yankee or now Met level money or Dodger level money, or to be the Oakland A's or the Tampa Bay Rays and have a ridiculously low amount of money. What you want to shoot for is something like what St. Louis has, where you're a middle market kind of team and you have a little bit of money, but you don't overspend on guys. You can be able to get good talent for low prices and draft better. It forces you to do that. And I think having less money kind of forced Chris Drury to work on a shoestring budget. And it actually, I think, helped him a lot because he got the kind of guys that the Rangers actually needed. I know you could say that Blake Wheeler, Tyler Pitlick, Eric Gustafson, Nick Bonino, they're older guys, and they're not necessarily the most skilled guys, but that's actually what they needed. And so they got guys who are veterans. They also got a lot of guys who are local, which I think is kind of key, guys who really want to be there. Guys like Quick, guys like Bonino, who are from Connecticut and probably love the Rangers as kids. We know Quick did. And they're cheap. They're very physical, and or they have made deep playoff runs. We saw it with Bonino in Pittsburgh. We saw it with Quick, obviously, in Los Angeles. Blake Wheeler has been with the Winnipeg team that has been very, very good for a long time, but just hasn't gotten to the final. And so these are also guys that are just really hungry. So I think it was a great offseason for the Rangers. And I think, of course, you talk about Tarasenko and Kane going at the deadline and how hyped up those moves were. I thought Drury had a much better offseason than he did deadline.
Yeah, so I think he pretty much hit the nail on the head with how this team has gone so far.
No, absolutely. I agree 100% that he had a better offseason than deadline. And I have to say, Eric Gustafson has been phenomenal on the blue line. Phenomenal.
Feel the offseason.
Oh, my God. That was probably the best offseason pickup was Gustafson. And Bonino's doing well, too. Blake Wheeler's doing well. But I think Gustafson and Quick are the ones that stand out to me. And like I said, I think maybe Igor is injured. He's playing through an injury or something. He doesn't look as good as he usually is. And I don't know if it's because they've been doing the goalie by committee a little bit here because we see Quick is going in a little bit more often. Obviously, on back-to-back games, the backup is going to go in after a start the night before by your starter. But when you watch Quick play and you watch Shesterkin play, it seems night and day right now. So a little concerned about Igor and if he's playing hurt or whatever. But yeah, no, this Rangers team is definitely exceeding expectations, at least in the beginning of this season. We'll see what the second 2/3 of the game, whatever it is, the last 2/3 of the season is, but I'm very, very excited to see what they're going to do moving forward. And if we get into the playoffs, what that looks like.
Yeah, for sure here. Got a couple more clips to go as we wrap up our spot here. So obviously we talk about the Jets earlier. Let's talk about the New York Giants a little bit here because everybody had high hopes of the Giants. They made the playoffs the year before. They did not start out particularly well. I mean, this team went 2-8, although Tommy Cutlets over here has won 3 straight football games as a recording.
I don't watch the Giants that much, but I've seen so many memes about Tommy Cutlets. Yeah. Second, is he backup or third string?
His third string entering the year.
Right, because Tyrod Taylor was the backup, correct?
Yeah, he got hurt in the Jet game, and they wouldn't let.
Yeah, has he been doing well?
DeVito?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been okay. He's been not making mistakes, and he's looked more confident than he did in the Jet game. So,
I mean, so here's the other thing. I could be completely wrong, so I apologize. Is what really happened with the Giants, right? Like, I feel like we came off a really big high with the Giants. Daniel Jones got a massive contract this past year, right? Or massive for him, probably for what he deserves, let's call it. But what happened? I mean, is it an O-line issue? Is it a Daniel Jones issue?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that question, because I do have a clip about that. Because
awesome.
Well, my friend's a big Giant fan. He comes on the podcast, he usually has some rants, and he admits they sucked him in after last year, and he shared his thoughts on their disappointment here. So this is from episode 390 here. So this is during our NFL pick segment in week 10. It's right before the Cowboy game.
I've been the ever overly pessimistic, although I would say realistic Giants fan since for the last several years. For the very first time in probably 10 years, I went into the season optimistic and with hope. I really thought this is the year. We've got it. Like, we finally have turned the ship around. We've washed away the sins of Gettleman's past. We're smooth sailing from here. And then the Giants went and lost 40-0 to the Cowboys, and I can't believe I fell for the trap. But this is all one of my classic random rants, and you ask you a very straightforward question. We have no talent on offense. Like, everyone says Saquon's really carrying the whole offense. He really hasn't done much. Like, and he really hasn't had the opportunity to do much. But he's not what he used to be, and I think people foolishly still think he is. And our best receiver is probably someone that 99% of casual football fans haven't even heard of. I don't even know who you would say the best receiver is. Jalen Hyatt? I don't know. Who would you say the Giants' best receiver is?
All I know is that I heard preseason that Jalen Hyatt was going to torch Sauce Gardner for one route, and that never happened.
I mean, I've seen flashes where I could see him turning into a really good deep threat. It hasn't materialized a lot because the line has been so bad. But also, he really hasn't even been playing that much. They have the skilled player talent on this team is so barren and pathetic. Darren Waller's good, but even, of course, he's injured now. It's just, we have nothing going on. There's nothing we're good at. Like, it's just the same sorry state of affairs.
Yeah, I think that answered your question pretty well, in terms of how they got where they were.
Yeah, the only thing I disagree with was Darren Waller being good. I feel like I had him in fantasy, and for a long time he wasn't doing anything for me, even before he was injured. And that was the extent of what I knew about Darren Waller before I traded him. So my, obviously my knowledge when it comes to Giants offensive players is not vast, but I did know that Darren Waller was not producing. Yeah. It sucks. If you're a fan of any team, whether it be the Giants, the Jets, the Rangers, the Islanders, Buffalo Sabres, whatever it is, if your team's not doing well and you were expected to do well, it's a real big letdown. You're like, oh my God, we're here. We're gonna finally do something. Like, we're gonna possibly go to the playoffs and win this thing. Like, we went 1 round, 2 rounds, whatever it was for the Giants last year. This is gonna be great. This is our quarterback. We found him, and it's just like it's such a. It hurts, right? I mean, as a Jets fan, we all know it all well. I was at the butt fumble game, and I refused to go to a game for years after that butt fumble game with Mark Sanchez. So I get it. It sucks. Hopefully, I mean, look, is this even a coaching issue, or is it a GM issue because they're not getting the right players in there?
I think it's a little bit. They were left a mess.
Both.
They're trying to fix it, and I do think they've won 3 in a row as of recording time. They are still alive in the playoff race. They're only 1 game out. They have a couple of teams in their play directly ahead of them, and they play in a few weeks. That'll help here. And got a fun timestamp for you for when we're recording this podcast. This is being recorded on Tuesday, December 12th. So this after the Giant Packer Monday night game. The Giants walked off here, and I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, Pete, but this was prophecy for years.
I did not. Can you enlighten me on that? Because I don't
Sure.
I don't know.
I have a clip to show you from a classic movie, Coming to America, brought to us our attention by RG3. So let's go ahead here and play this.
Sir, I was wondering, did you happen to catch the professional football contest on television last night?
No, I didn't.
Oh, it was most exhilarating. The Giants of... And in the end, the Giants triumphed by kicking an oblong ball made of pigskin to a big H. It was a most ripping victory.
So back in 1988, Eddie Murphy called this game. He called this game.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's right there on Twitter. You said RG3 was the one that posted that?
RG3 found it.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I just thought crazy. It's wild that came true. It's almost as good as the Back to the Future calling the Cub World Series 1 year early.
Yeah, that one was wild. That one was really close.
Yeah.
Maybe the time travelers. Who knows?
Maybe they are here. And I got 2 more clips to hit here for this special here. So I know right now, I don't know if you're aware of the big playoff controversy of the college football playoff with Florida State, because that's been a big topic of late.
Yeah, so I mean, you've explained a little bit. Florida State was undefeated, and their quarterback got hurt, and I guess
so. Here's the short version of it. It was they were cruising to the best team in the ACC. Their quarterback gets hurt with 3 games left in the regular season. They struggle with the backup. The backup gets hurt. They have to win the ACC title game with a 3rd stringer. They're one of 3 undefeated teams. They win the ACC undefeated. They get left out of the playoff because the committee doesn't think that they're going to be capable of competing on the big stage without their star.
I mean, there's more than one person on that field.
Yeah.
It's not just the quarterback.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I understand the quarterback does a lot for your team. We, as Jet fans, know that. But to me, that doesn't seem fair for the rest of the players. Just be like, you can't go in to the playoffs because some guy got hurt. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think I'll point this out here. Like, I did bring this possibility up with Sporting News' Bill Bender on our podcast previewing the conference championship games here. So this is what Bill and I had to say. This is a possibility. We brought this up a couple of days before we did before the games are played, and this was a possibility. So let's go to Bill and I from episode 393, I believe. So here we go.
I don't think that's going to happen. I can see the sentiment behind it. I understand everything you just said. And, I get it that they're rolling with a backup quarterback. The offense didn't look good last week, but they still got the win. And there's a lot of playoff hopefuls that are going to be rooting for Louisville this weekend. I just can't see the committee turning away a Power 5 undefeated team, regardless of how they got there. Doesn't matter. They got there. And that's why I think I wouldn't count on them being left out.
Yeah, I do think it's a fascinating debate for the committee because this is the first time they've ever really had it in football where, I mean, we see it in the basketball tournament where, like, if a team loses a star player, it might get dinged a few seed lines, whereas this one, there's only 4 teams in here. If they feel like Florida State won't be competitive without their quarterback, it'll be an interesting debate for them to have.
Yeah, for sure. But, I mean, it will. And I think one of that is when we do the point spread arguments. Like, for example, in this scenario we're talking about, if Florida State played Georgia, what would the spread be? Probably about 15 and a half. If Texas played them, would they be a lower underdog? Yes. But you have to earn it on the field. And the committee, I just don't see them. They could, I suppose, say 4 very best teams and go with Texas. But the ramifications of that and the distrust it would cause with one of its Power 5 conferences, I don't know. I just don't see it.
Yeah, this is one I put in the category of something we put in the universe and manifesting it. And I agree with Bill. I don't like the precedent they set with that. I feel like it's not like the rest of the team's fault that the quarterback got hurt.
Right. I mean, so quick question. Were they allowed to play in the playoffs or is this still under review?
No, like they were only picked 4 teams. They were not picked. They were playing in a different boat.
So this was confirmed. You are not playing in the playoff that you were supposed to play in.
They were not. They did not make they were not picked for the playoff. And the committee basically said because the quarterback is hurt, we don't think they're one of the best 4 teams now.
I mean, I gotta be honest with you. That's bullshit because the playoff should be what your record is and how your team is done. Not I decide if you go because a lot of corruption can happen there.
Yeah,
and I feel like you can't say to a team, "Hey, you got to this point, you've earned it." But now we don't want you here because you don't have your quarterback, so it's not going to be good TV. or it's not going to be a good bowl, or it's not going to be good. Like, I'm sorry, what? I mean, how many people? I look at the Rangers in 2014. Rangers had a monster season, pretty much get blown out by the LA Kings in the finals. Do we say, oh, the Rangers are tired, so we're just going to switch the team that the Kings are going to play against? No.
Yeah, it's one I don't like. I mean, like, what's the point of playing the games if you can win all your games out of a power league?
Right.
Not
this
go?
Literally shows that your performance doesn't matter.
No, it matters for they cared. They chose what they think would be better at TV. And I know the playoffs expand.
So who's the team? Who's the team they picked, and what was their record compared to Florida State?
But here's the story here. There were 3 undefeated our conference teams, which was Michigan and Washington got in fully healthy. Texas was the 3rd seed. Alabama was the 4th. They knocked off undefeated Georgia in the SEC. The controversy would have been Texas beat Alabama in the regular season. You can't take Alabama over Texas. So they took both of them and let Florida State out.
Yeah, to me, that's not right. If I was a player or a coach or an administrator in Florida State, I would be livid with the committee. Yeah. Livid.
Oh, I agree with you. And on a positive note here with some hope for 2024. I don't know if you heard, there was a big baseball trade like last week.
I did hear.
Yeah. So Juan Soto's a Yankee. I'm sure as a Yankee fan, you're excited about this.
So as a Yankee fan, I'm excited. I got to be honest with you. I did not know who Juan Soto was until about a week ago.
Yeah.
So this is, again, another thing where I probably should be watching more New York sports and understand who's coming to the team. Call me a fake fan or whatever, but like when the season's on, I watch it and I try to keep track of it. When it's not, other teams. I'm very bad when it comes to players on other teams unless they're like star players, and that's only for like hockey. With baseball, basketball, football, baseball, basketball, those are the ones that I kind of lack on. Football and hockey, I kind of have a sense of what's going on.
Yeah, I get that sense here as well. But like, we'll talk about. I had Dan Federico on the podcast a couple weeks ago. We reacted to the Juan Soto trade. Here's his thoughts on this. Is our final clip of the episode. So let's listen to Dan talk about what Juan Soto means for the Yankees.
I mean, it's an absolute no-brainer move that the Yankees had to make. I mean, they're checking off boxes, in just one move where it's, you need a left-handed bat, a big one at that, check. You need reassurance in the outfield, check. You need somebody to, protect Aaron Judge in the lineup, or, whether it's batting in front of him or behind, that's something I guess we'll see as we go on. And then at the same time, you're adding somebody who is the same age as a prospect you called up that you have a lot of high hopes for this past season. So, I mean, like I said, no brainer. His credentials, his past speaks for itself. He's been a fantastic player in Major League Baseball. Speaking about the health issues right before, I mean, he's somebody who plays in games all the time. I mean, he's somebody who's always on the field, always playing. Listen, there's questions about his defense. Obviously, he's only under contract for 1 year, and with Scott Boras as his agent, they're not going to iron anything out until next offseason. But for the 2024 Yankees, which that's only as far as we can all look ahead to, it's the absolute perfect no-brainer, 100% move. And then when you factor in what they gave up for him, yes, they lost some pieces, but there's no one on there that would have stopped me from making the move. And, even for a 1 year deal, I think it was a pretty, move that I don't want to say a simple ask because they did give up 5 people for it, but, it was still a move where you check everyone off and say, yep, no problem. I'll give them up for somebody who wants Soto's caliber.
Yeah, it's going to be very exciting to be a Yankee fan because they got a superstar coming here. They're still working on trying to get another one in the Japanese pitcher Yamamoto.
Yeah, I mean, listen, sometimes you have to give up talent to get talent. Nothing's for free in this world, right? So, I mean, like your guest had mentioned, you gave up some pieces, but you're getting a top tier talent, what it sounds like. And, the hype around Juan Soto is real. I've heard his name a bunch of times on the Michael Kay show, obviously, because Michael Kay is the announcer for the Yankees. And, I've heard the rumblings about getting Juan Soto, so I know it's a big piece they've added. So, I mean, let's see what happens. We have him for a year. That concerns me a little bit. Is this like a bridge deal? Is this we're going to have him for a year, we don't win, he goes somewhere else? We don't know yet, obviously, because if what your guest said about the manager is correct, we're not going to know until how this season goes. So if this season's a bust, he may walk in one of those failures, right, in sports where you got him, it didn't work out, and he leaves. So we'll see. I mean, I'm excited. I want to see another Yankees championship. I've been fortunate enough to see a Yankees championship. But we'll see how the season goes.
Yeah, the interesting to see here, obviously, in light of Shohei Ohtani getting all that money, Juan Soto's price tag has went up.
Yeah, and also too, I was finding interesting about Otani's contract. It's about $2 million a year, and then the other like $600 million is deferred.
Oh, don't get me started on that.
Oh man, who's the guy in the Mets that's still getting paid to this day?
Oh, Bobby Bonilla.
They're gonna have Shohei Otani Day, where just every year he's gonna get paid $68 million for 10 years. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go back on that rabbit hole again. I did a few weeks ago on the podcast, but Pete, thanks again for taking the time to join me. If people want to follow you on social media, how can they do that?
At Consy29 on Twitter, CONSY29. In the background, I'm using AP Tyler 308 from Reddit, so give them a check.
Absolutely. Here, and if you want to check out what we're doing on the Sky Guys podcast feed this week, we're actually reviewing the documentary about the holiday specials that they released a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Those are one of the ones I missed, right?
No, that's one we're recording in the future before. So
right. Okay, good. I have my scheduling all messed up. So yeah, no, that's gonna be a good one. I'm excited for it.